you. I'm excited to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and someone please tell me if you're not able to see it.
We're able to see it.
Okay, so we're good. Okay, so again, thank you guys for coming to the workshop. We are here to talk about who protects the strong Black woman. And so I see a number of people are here. That lets me know that there's interest in the topic. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys today. So we have three objectives today. The first one is we're going to explore the history of sexual violence against African-American women prior to colonization. And then we're going to examine strategies to be more culturally responsive to the needs of African-American survivors in the form of practice implications. And then we're going to understand the unique position African-American women occupy in order to provide culturally responsive advocacy. So before we get started, I want to do a bit of housekeeping. So the first thing that we need to, I'm sorry, it's distracting me because I'm seeing my name. I wonder if there's I'm seeing my voice talking. I wonder, can I get rid of that? Okay, sorry, I did. Okay, so first and foremost, some of the materials may be difficult to hear, and some of the slides that I have may also be difficult to watch or to look at. So please take care of yourself in whatever way you need to, as always. And then remember that this space needs to be a safe space. So remember to be respectful of each other. And let's try to honor this space by keeping everything that's said in here confidential. I do like to have interactive presentations. And so if you want to share something, it's important that this space is safe for everyone. And finally, I do enjoy interactive discussions, and I will engage you often. So please either type your questions in the chat or raise your hand if you want to engage with me verbally. But I like to take questions during the presentation, and I'll also have some time at the end as well. And then finally, for the purpose of this workshop, please know that when I say women, I'm referring to cis and trans women. And then when I say Black, I'm talking anyone from the African diaspora. All right. So I first would like to know who is in the room. I like to know who I'm talking to because I don't want to spend a great deal of time talking about something that doesn't really apply to you. So please drop in the chat and let me know who you are. What do you do? More what you do than who you are. Let me know. Now, if I can see the chat, that out.
So, Kiva, we have some in the chat and we have answers. We have a lot of responses. So we have counselor, we have advocate, prevention specialist, sexual assault advocate, sexual assault coalition staff, community engagement coordinators, more counselors, advocates. We have a professor, director of intervention / prevention, community organizer, family advocate, DVSA, a member liaison. We also have campus advocates, violence prevention educator, as well as community educator / trainer. Thank you all for your responses.
Yes, thank you. So that helps me to know who I have in the room because I don't want to go down a path and it doesn't apply to anyone here. So thank you guys for that. And then before we really get started, as always, I would love to take my hat off. My hats, not hats, off to survivors. As we know, 81% of women and 43% of men experience sexual harassment and assault during their lifetime. And then a quarter of men and a quarter of women and a fifth of men also experience sexual assault during their lifetime. And so I know that there are survivors in this room. So hats off to you and for doing this work and helping others and Yeah, thank you for what you do. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the history. I really enjoyed doing the research. It was a little bit depressing, but I enjoyed doing the research on the history. How did we get this strong Black woman? When did this come into play? When did this responsibility fall on people who look like me? So today we're here to talk about the strong Black woman, and we'll start with that history. The enslavement of African American women in the US continues to affect the lives of Black women today. And history contextualizes that the present, given the preponderance of racist, sexist, and classist ideologies, remain embedded within the US culture. Those stereotypes those stereotypical views of Black women that originated during the slave era are still pervasive now. And I'm going to learn how to talk. Apologize, you guys. So the first picture, let's look at this. You've probably seen this before. This is a picture of a Black woman nursing a white baby. This happened often in the past. So origins of the strong Black woman date back to the North American chattel slavery. Rationalization of the enslavement of African women was hinged on the belief that they are superior or that they were superior in physical and psychological strength compared to white women, and they were the equal of Black men. And so for hundreds of years, systematic cultural and institutional oppression have disenfranchised these Black women and their families. And because of these oppressive social barriers and stifling government policies, Black communities have endured underdeveloped infrastructures, limited socioeconomic mobility. I know you guys see that in your work, and disproportionately high levels of crime. So, next slide. There are several descriptions of what these Black women were like. There were four different ones, according to one of the studies that I read. So you have the Black woman who is the mammy, and she was nurturing. She was considered asexual, and she was overly selfless. You guys have seen this character in movies like Gone with the Wind and other movies. And this is one stereotype of the Black woman. And as we saw in the slide before, she was also taking care of the children of the families that she worked for, that she was enslaved to. Now, if we fast forward a little bit, we still see a bit of this, but it's more of a matriarchal type Black woman. And this woman, these are strong women who are the matriarchs of their families. And so I have Irma B. Hall here, who's in the movie Soul Food, perfect depiction of what that woman looks like in a family. And then I have Aunt Viv from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the first one, of course. And then, of course, Claire Huxtable, we all know her as well. So these characters all embody that matriarchal point of view that we've seen with Black women. When Black women without tangible and intangible support are forced to simultaneously assume the roles of financial provider, caregiver, and community agent, it becomes like the cornerstone of the family. And it's often not a choice, but a social and economic obligation. And we're just thrown into that. So strong Black women were birthed of necessity, and they were created to endure physical and mental oppression and maintain throughout generations to ensure the survival of the Black families. And Mamie and matriarchs of Black families were crucial to this happening. And so their existence is a reflection of historical and economic hardship. And today, the strong Black woman emerges from a variety of educational, socioeconomic, and familial backgrounds. Although diverse in other demographic markers, the strong Black woman persists through familial and societal socialization and behavioral modeling. Any questions or comments or interjections about this view of the strong Black woman? All for a bit, just to make sure. Okay, we're going to move on. So the next one is Sapphire. And this is the Black woman who is argumentative. She's highly hostile. She's demasculating. I believe this is where, angry Black woman, where that stereotype comes from. If you see this cartoon caricature of the husband and the wife, you see, he's um, definitely subservient to her, and she has the rolling pin, and violent, hostile, argumentative. That's what that looks like. Okay. The next one is the welfare queen. I'm sure you've heard of her because, yeah, we all can get rich off of welfare, right? So she is going to the car dealership and buying the stereotypical Black car, the Cadillac, and saying she'll take two. And the assumption is she has, many kids at home, and she is lazy and she's dependent on the federal government to take care of her. And I have not checked stats lately, but last I heard, the number one recipient of welfare was white women. And so I don't know if that's still accurate or not. So this clearly is a myth. If we fast forward today, we have the single Black mom. We see that a lot. And unfortunately, the US Census data reveals that 50.4% of all Black children live in a single mother household. And although there are multiple explanatory factors to explain that, Black single parent households in conjunction with neighborhood disorganization appears to contribute to the need for Black women to develop that strong, independent, and what word am I looking for? Self-sacrificing attitude. With increasing numbers of Black men being disproportionately incarcerated at high rates, that responsibility is even greater with Black women and Black families. We're seeing now that a lot of grandparents are raising their grandchildren as well because of things like that, because of the disproportionate incarceration of Black men and women. Sorry, I think there was something else I wanted to say. Oh, the strong Black woman schema is another coping skill for Black women as well. That psychological coping mechanism that facilitates the preservation of the family and the community. That's a big part of it as well. So finally, the last one is the Jezebel. And she is sexually promiscuous, and she's often fetishized. And there's this myth that Black women were vessels to use to justify enslavement, rape, force, reproduction, and other forms of sexual coercion in the early onset of Western civilization. The fact that Black women's bodies are the way that they are, and we're different, we're built differently, or we were, I think things are changing now. I think that led to that myth that we are used for sex, rape, forced reproduction, and to work as when we were enslaved. That's where this one comes from. And so with these 4 stereotypes and what we've seen in the past, that has really led us to what we're seeing now. I really would like to have just a bit of interaction with you guys. Any thoughts about what you've seen? Can you relate to any of those? Have you seen these stereotypes in media before? Anyone, and I'll pause and give you guys a chance. You can either type in the chat or you can unmute and go ahead and speak if you'd like to do that. What have you seen in the media?
Someone in the chat said, I see it often in Tyler Perry films.
Yeah, me too. I refuse to put Medea in here. I refuse. She came up when I searched for Black matriarchs, and I was like, yeah, no, we'll pass on for Medea. Anyone else? Courtney says that she has heard these stereotypes when I speak to Latinx folks. Yeah, there's a lot of correlation between this presentation, and we could probably easily adjust it to fit the Latinx population, the Native population, and others. The Jezebel and the Sapphire. Yeah, those are all very interesting. Okay, thank you guys for engaging. I was feeling all alone here. So let's get back to the presentation. And again, feel free to type any questions in as you have them. So as a result of this stereotype, the Sisterella complex has come out of that. And what the Sisterella complex is, it's a type of a functional depression experienced by women who embrace the characteristics of the strong Black woman. And as I did this research, I thought about the women in my family. I've often said, since I've been a therapist, that I see depression in my family largely untreated. And when I saw this, I'm like, this makes so much sense, because it is a functional depression. These people are able to maintain their lives, and it doesn't really appear to interfere with their social and occupational functioning. But I do see this here. And so this is where this comes in. So the Black women who internalize this Sisterella complex, they often suffer quietly. They work very hard to meet the expectations of their family, their jobs, and the larger society. Rather than seeking help, these women turn inward, beating themselves up and experiencing excessive feelings of guilt and worthlessness when they have sacrificed too much of themselves, or become unable to meet realistic expectations that have been bestowed upon them. So more importantly, their psychological turmoil is masked by the appearance of unparalleled strength, the unifying commonality among all of the previously described constructs. So this is something that I see all the time. And if I'm not careful, I can't even see this in myself. I was just thinking this week, I have so much going on and I need to carve out time for self-care. And just making an appointment for a massage, which I have like 10 stored up because I haven't gone regularly, is something that I haven't carved out the time to do. We often take care of everyone else, and by the time we do that, we're so spent that there is no time to take care of ourselves, because you feel the pressure and the responsibility of being a strong Black woman. So this Sisterella complex is very relevant, and I hadn't heard of it before. Okay, so who is the strong Black woman? And I have several pictures here. Just pick one that may apply to you, but put a me in the chat if you can relate to this picture. If you feel like any of these women in this picture, put a me in the chat for me, so I'll know that I'm not by myself. So characteristics emerge across the constructs to define the strong Black woman as a provider, a caretaker. She's resistant to vulnerability. I cannot talk today. Sorry, you guys. Or dependency. She displays strength. She suppresses emotions. She succeeds despite inadequate resources. I know you guys have seen, old shows from the 70s where people like Florida Evans and others just will make a way out of no way. They'll take something small and be able to feed a family of 15. We see that all the time in some of the older shows, and even now, they despite inadequate resources, they're still able to make things happen. And they assume responsibilities as a community agent. We take care of each other. And again, the responsibility of the strong Black woman. Together, if we put all of these constructs together and capture the socialized and often internalized perception that Black women, just because of their gender and their history, are obligated to assume an innumerable amount of responsibilities while consistently manifesting strength. I hope that makes sense. So they're taking on all of these roles, but they still have to be strong. So there's really no time to cry, no time to be depressed. You just have to keep going. A few other things to describe this woman. She is strong in the presence of extreme fear and pain. I remember my aunt, who was in her 90s, before she died. She had a fall, a pretty bad one, and a big gash in the back of her head. And I remember going to the ER with her, and the doctors needed to put staples in her head, and she did it without anesthesia and did not shed a tear. In fact, I've never seen her cry, and I've never seen my grandmother, who's now 89, never seen her cry. And by the way, my grandmother has survived COVID twice at 89. So just, that's a strong Black woman. They're also resistant to vulnerability. They're unwilling to ask for assistance. And, that word sounds really harsh, like there's assistance there and they choose not to ask. But I think it's more about the perception of asking for help, because if you're not able to do all of these things, then somehow you're not strong like you're supposed to be. And we'll talk more about that, how that's passed on. I just recently, with so much guilt, decided to find someone to help keep my house clean, because I don't have the time to do it. But I often felt guilty because I feel like I should have the time to do it. And so just even paying people to help me with the things that I don't have the time to do really makes me feel like I'm not as strong as my grandmother was, or as my mom was. Okay, I think I heard someone unmute. Do I have a comment?
Yeah, Kiva, Alejandra said, is this why we see Black women as a supporting character that are supposed to solve other people's problems while dealing with their own issues in media?
I think so. What do you think, Alejandra? I think so. I think that fits perfectly. Thank you for that comment. Also, they deal with life in solitude. Many times people don't even know what they deal with because they're able to put that face on, take care of everyone else, do everything. I'm not saying, Black women are not magical, because they are. You notice I didn't say this is a myth, because it's not, but it's a great responsibility. And then there are the emotional displays that are considered signs of weakness and inadequacies, which may explain why you may not see them cry. You may not see them show anger. Isabel, see your hand. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, thank you. So just a question, when thinking about, these, I guess, descriptions of what a strong Black woman should be doing and things, I think a lot about the neurology of trauma, right? Like the brain and how the trauma impacts the brain and things. And so a lot of what I'm hearing is similar to like what we talk about with the neurobiology of trauma and the idea and perceptions. And so the Black community has had systemic oppression and like all of these things that create additional trauma. So I just linking that for me, like just hearing this and just like, man, like this is trauma stuff. Like this, it's just like a statement that I wanted to say, I guess, or like a thought that I had about this. So yeah, definitely really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that comment. And we are going to talk a little bit more later on about racial trauma, because that is very relevant and needs to be discussed with this. So thank you, Isabel. And as you go ahead.
We have another question in the chat.
Please go ahead.
It is from Sarah Tate Gibbs. What do you do when you see it in yourself and want to get off this train sometimes?
For me personally, I'm evolving, even just putting this together was very eye-opening for me. And I stopped in that very moment and made some appointments for me, like at the nail shop and things like that. But I find myself working more now that I'm still home. And so now that I'm home, I feel like I work a lot more than I ever did before. I'll get up. I'll stop work for the day and then come back later, because on the other side of the wall behind me is my bedroom. And so it's very easy to just come in here and work on something and always want to be productive. But putting this together really helped me to see some of my deficits and what I need to look at and what I need to prioritize. Like family is very important to me. Work is very important to me, but I need to look at where I want to put my energy. I don't want to spend all my energy in work, and then I don't have anything to give to my family. So that for me, it's just evolving. I wish I had an answer, but giving ourselves permission. I mean, you see what's been in the news with Simone Biles and others, and people just taking care, Naomi, people taking care of their mental health unapologetically, and those happen to be Black women that are doing that. And I think we need to do more of that, and we need to not vilify people when they do that. I had a good friend that sent me a text yesterday, and he said that he really was disappointed, patriarchal, but he said he's really disappointed in Simone because she had a job to do, and sometimes you have to suck it up and do your job. And I just wrote back to him, therein lies the problem. I hope we can have a discussion about this. And he's a little older, and so I think, you know, he just grew up in that era where you just pull yourself up by the bootstrap and you just get it done, and there are no excuses. And I think that's to our detriment. But as generations come along, like I love Generation Z so much, because I think that some of these things that need to change will change because of the young people that are growing up now that are saying, you know, I'm going to make sure I'm going to prioritize my mental health, and I'll deal with the consequences of that. So I answered your question with way too much information, but that's my answer. Anyone else? Questions or comments? I'm loving the interaction. No? Okay, let's move on. So Black women, according to one study I wrote, Black women report feeling pressure to act like superwoman or superwomen, and I know that I do. And they project themselves as strong, self-sacrificing, and free of emotion, to come with the stress of racial and gender-based discrimination in their daily lives. So what Isabel said earlier about what's going on now, systemic racism and other forms of oppression, those things happen daily. And so as that's happening, there's this pressure that's just kind of unspoken to be strong, self-sacrificing, and free of emotion, always. A recent study by the African American Women's Heart and Health Study revealed a direct link between racial discrimination and chronic disease risk. And that's really concerning.
It's Monica. I was just going to say that, like, the thing that keeps coming up for me, Kiva, is this internalized pressure and external pressure that is being internalized, the toll, to Isabel's point, that it takes on our neurobiology, but also on our physical well-being.
Absolutely.
That coupled with this myth of meritocracy that if you just work hard enough, you'll make it because it's an even playing field. And part of my French, the bullshit health system we have and the rates of mortality for women, you know, it just is, it's really an ugly, ugly soup.
It really is. Thank you, Monica. Monica's my friend. And this adds to just that body of literature out there right now that shows that the experience of racial discrimination alone can be detrimental to one's health. It really can be. But yet we're arguing over studying critical race theory and teaching it in schools. So I think we're missing the mark on a lot of things. So thank you guys for the discussion. A few other constructs I wanted to go over. One is the perceived obligations to suppress fear and weakness, showcase strengths, and to resist being vulnerable or dependent, constantly helping others and succeeding despite limited resources. And then the quote below is actually what Sojourner Truth wrote describing the plight of such women as the strong Black woman. And she said that the assumption of economic, household, and community responsibilities, which are expressed in family headships, working outside the home like a man, and the constant need to address community empowerment, often carried out in conditions made difficult by discrimination and scarce resources. And this was decades ago when Sojourner Truth was alive. And so, as you see, really not much has changed. Okay, so let's talk about what the strong Black woman looks like today. Do you know these women? Do you perceive them as strong? So we look at the Stacey Abrams, Kamala Harris, and Serena Williams. We look at these women, we see, you know, Stacey Abrams single-handedly changed Georgia to blue. She really did. You know, her efforts at community organizing and registering people to vote. She did that. Kamala Harris, very first Black woman to serve as vice president. Huge. And I believe she was also the first Black district attorney in maybe LA, some city in California. I'm not 100% sure. And then Serena Williams, I mean, she's a legend in tennis. So these women are independent. We see that they take care of family and others. You know, when you look at Kamala, you know, she always has her nieces and I don't know if they're nephews. I've always seen little girls, but she has them with her. You see Serena and her daughter, you know, they're always taking care of others. They're hardworking and high achieving. We can't deny that about any of these women. They overcome adversity often. I could easily have put Michelle Obama up here as well. I love her book where she very, very graciously talks about her time in the White House, and she's so classy that she didn't say anything disparaging, but the discrimination that she dealt with, she hints at. But I can only imagine what really happened and how much worse it was. And then also these women are always emotionally contained. Like you rarely see them show emotions. Whenever Serena does get emotional on the court, then she is penalized for it. You know, that's what I've seen. And I'm not even a sports fan, but I've seen that happen to her. But we're not supposed to be emotional. It's almost like we're not supposed to be real. Like other people are allowed to do things that we can't. And so now let's talk about other generations and what happens. There is this transmission of the strong Black woman schema. So aunts and mothers, sisters, grandmothers, and other females that are related to us socialize us to embrace independent and multiple role behaviors through dialogue, modeling, and vicarious conditioning. What do you think this mom or this woman is saying to this younger woman with the expressions on their faces? Like to me, this, when I was looking for clip art, I saw this one and I'm like, I really can imagine her telling her how to handle some sort of an adversity that she went through and what she needs to deal with. Any other thoughts on what this picture shows you? No? Any comments in the
Marissa
chat?
Traylor said, I agree.
Yeah, thank you. From a young age, Black girls learn that it's essential to be a strong Black woman and the qualities that one must possess to assume this role. I definitely remember being talked to by the women in my life that I looked at about, I mean, that I looked up to about being strong, about, you know, how to handle conflict, all of those things. It was something that I was just socialized to do and take on. And so you have that where you're directly being told those things. And then you have the media, which portrays these Black women, like you saw a few slides back, Aunt Viv, Claire Huxtable. They're portrayed as breadwinners, matriarchs, who are able to be strong, independent, resilient, nurturing, and selfless, all at the same time. That's TV. There's also film, music, magazine. Let's talk about a little bit about the media. What kinds of things have you seen in magazines, newspapers? Either unmute or go ahead and type in the chat. Do we see anyone?
Do you mind repeating the question? I'm sorry, I had trouble hearing.
That's okay. Let's talk about what kind of media images we've seen of Black women. So whether that be music, whether that be TV, film, whatever the case is.
Thank you for repeating the question.
No worries. Anyone, what do you see? What do you remember, especially shows you may have seen as a child growing up? Anything? Anybody? Okay. I
Um,
guess not. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I'm really thinking about Claire Huxtable, especially because you had her picture earlier, and she really sticks out for me because the Cosby Show, I think, had a big impact on my childhood. And
Yeah.
you know, thinking about Claire Huxtable, she was very poised, very
Mhm.
classy, and a lot of people, you know, talk about how that show had an impact, and that's wonderful. But I think it boxes in, it can box in Black women, right? Like they can only be a particular way. Um,
Mhm.
you know, they're not allowed to be vulnerable, like the things that
Mhm.
you've been saying, or you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
We've definitely you see some of the characteristics of the women that I talked about in the beginning. You see some of those in Claire Huxtable, because what, you know, a lot of people say that it's not realistic, you know, in terms of what she did, but certainly it's realistic for a Black woman to go to law school and be an attorney and have a family. But when you look at the show, you know, at some point I remember there was an episode where she made partner. So she's a partner in a law firm. She works every day. She comes home. She cooks dinner for her family. It looks like every day. Doesn't look like she has any help. You know, there have been episodes where she's cleaning. She is, you know, completely in tune to everything that's going on with her 5 kids, or I think it was 5, with her 5 kids, and she's available to them. She's helping with homework, getting them ready for dances, and she is a great wife to her husband. They have a good relationship on the show. They are in love with each other, and you have to nurture that as well. When does she have time to do all of that? I don't know about you guys. I'm exhausted at the end of the day, especially with the kind of work that I do, that I don't have a whole lot left to give. I can't even imagine helping 5 kids with homework and cooking dinner and making sure my husband is eating right and having sex with my husband before I go to bed and looking beautiful and wearing heels. Like, it's a lot, you know? I don't know if that's real or not. Let's see. I see some other
We had other
things in the
comments.
chat. Yeah, I see them now because I'm not sharing, so I think I have these. So some of the same descriptions I mentioned, some kind of an athlete or a teacher. Yeah, we see that in the media. Reiteration of the same Black stereotypes. Good Times in Florida Evans. She was definitely the glue that held her family together. And for those of you that don't know, that show, Good Times, was a spinoff from All in the Family. And originally, Esther Roll, who was the matriarch of that family, they wanted her to be a single parent. And she is known for taking a stand and insisting on having a father for her children. But she was going to be portrayed as the welfare mom. And back then in the 70s, you know, for her to have the courage to say, I'll only do this if, you know, and to bargain, that was really unheard of. So she's definitely a shero in our world. Let's see, on the talk shows, oh gosh, I can't even bear to watch the talk shows. The loudmouth, bombastic women who don't know who the father of their child is, like trash, you know. Somebody else said living single, and all of the ladies that are different representations of various types of Black women. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Okay. Carol said, we all know that that is not real with Claire Huxtable. We are too tired to be doing all of that. For me, I think of Shonda Rhimes and her depiction of Black women and their complexities and character. She definitely does it well. I was a huge Scandal fan. It was a little scary, actually. I'm so kind of glad that it's off because I had gone to the bad place. But when I look at all of her shows, you're right. She's able to show how complex we are. I always remember television showing or portraying them as having to problem solve for their male partners, almost like they always had to have their emotions in check. Yeah. Reminds me of the magical Negro trope. Amanda, thank you for sharing that. I was literally thinking about living single. I also think of Insecure, which I love that as well, which also shows the many facets of Black women. Yeah. Thank you guys for engaging me in this discussion. And so, you know, we really have to look at the media and how they perpetuate some of these myths and how they are complicit in this pressure to be the strong Black woman and not supporting that stuff, especially the talk shows. Those are just the worst ever. Okay, so the invisible Black woman. One of the articles that I looked at actually described the invisible Black woman being the person that is involved in this story, this dangerous single story that's about Black women that uplift their strengths, perseverance, and survival, and then minimize their emotional well-being, their tenderness, their humanity. And they are rarely protected, hence the title of my presentation. In fact, Black women are very rarely protected while others are. For every Black woman who reports rape, at least 15 Black women, I'm sorry, for every woman, let me make that real clear. For every woman who reports a rape, at least 15 Black women do not. 1 in 4 Black girls will be sexually abused before the age of 18. And I'm not big on stats, but these are astounding to me. 1 in 4 Black girls will be sexually abused before the age of 18. More than 20% of Black women are raped during their lifetimes, and that's a higher share among women overall. A few other things, let's see. Black women were 2.5 times more likely to be murdered by men than their white counterparts, and more than 9 in 10 Black female victims knew their killers. They're less likely to seek out help from law enforcement, and we don't even need to go into that. I mean, obviously, for lots of reasons. In domestic violence, there is this thing called racial loyalty, where Black women, if they're being abused, they don't want to call the police and report their husband because they don't want to feed into that stereotype of Black men. So another responsibility of the strong Black woman is protecting your man, even when he's not okay. And then now add to that it's highly likely someone may be killed if you call law enforcement to your house, because while I absolutely support police, we do have some that their implicit bias affects their actions. And so that could turn out very badly. So not reaching out to law enforcement, lack of resources, that's a constant issue. Sex abuse to prison pipeline. I read another, and you'll see my references at the end, but I read another article that talked about how young Black girls who were sexually abused, that even when people know, when family members know, they sort of sweep that under the rug, tell them to push past it, be strong, and internalizing that trauma leads to behaviors that may have them ending up in prison. So that sex abuse to prison pipeline. And I know we've seen it, many people that are incarcerated have a long trauma history, seriously. And it's not dealt with. And I would venture to say the same thing with Black men and people of color in general. Sexual assault may be a component of an anti-transgender hate crime or linked to other variables like race. So when we're talking about our trans sisters, that's something that happens a lot. Lots of sexual assault in that community. Many of them engage in sex work because how do you get a job when the way you present and what your license says they don't line up? Or if someone's able to clock you and they know that you were assigned a different gender at birth. So those things are things to think about as well. And 50% of transgender women report being assaulted while in police custody or jail. That stat was, I had to take a break after seeing that. And then when you think about African-American trans women, the number doubles to 30%. Did I hear someone unmute? Go ahead.
Yeah, Kiva, Jeanette said the sad thing is that they are assaulted by Black relatives and friends.
Yeah, yes, we know that. Yeah, I went to a play a few years ago in Dallas. They did a wonderful job in Dallas in Bishop Arts at their theater, and it was called In the Tall Grass, and it just showcased the murders of Black women, Black trans women, just in Dallas. And I had no idea. And so since then, that's been a population that's been really close to my heart because they are being sexually, I mean, talk about a strong Black woman. These women go through so many things just trying to survive and be who they are, be their authentic selves, and they're dealing with, you know, being misgendered by the police. There was the story that was told was centered around a woman who was murdered and subsequently misgendered in the news by police. The investigation was compromised because of all of that. And she died in a horrible way. They barely could identify her body, and I think they used her acrylic nails that someone was able to identify as her to even know who she was. So this is definitely a problem. We're going to get to what to do about it. So again, a little bit more about our trans sisters. You know, these are two very powerful Black trans women who are in the media, and they represent, you know, representation matters. And just 20 years ago, we rarely saw Black trans women in the media. So we have Laverne Cox, and then we have Janet Mock here. So I saw one study where they surveyed, this was in 2013, they surveyed a group of transgender people working in domestic violence and sexual assault advocacy agencies. And they did a qualitative study that was conducted, and they asked them about how discrimination impacted their practice and asked them for suggestions. And so they gave 3 recommendations. The first was to increase the voice, representation, and leadership of trans people, particularly trans people of color, working in the fields of DV and sexual assault advocacy. So first and foremost, our staff in our agencies need to represent the people that we serve. And so by hiring more people of color, more trans people, then the clients that we serve are more likely to connect with someone they can identify with. And then another thing that we can look at is like the pictures and the posters and pamphlets and brochures and things like that that we use to promote our agency. Is that really representative? Do we have trans people pictured there? Do we have, you know, people of color? Like, those are things that's important to think about, because if I were a trans woman, if I were a Black trans woman, if I didn't see anything that made me feel safe, I probably wouldn't chance going to receive services. The next one is to integrate trans justice values into survivor-centered advocacy. So thinking about all of the policies and things like that are in place right now or not in place, what can we do to mitigate that? For instance, the bathroom thing, you know, that's been a big deal for a number of years. Do you have, you know, unisex bathrooms or family bathrooms in your agencies where the person doesn't have to pick? And then finally, investing in prevention and cultural change strategies that improve the social status of trans people. That's important as well. I'm going to move to the next slide because I actually have a few examples of, did I get this up? Yeah, no, this is right. A few examples of things that we can do. So one, again, building meaningful relationships with trans-led organizations and groups at the local level. So if there are local organizations that support the trans community, reaching out to them, maybe doing MOUs and collaborating with them is one thing that we can do. Another one is to hire and train trans people as advocates, particularly trans people of color. That's important. Build a leadership pipeline within the field that can advance trans advocates to leadership positions and diversify job responsibilities. That's important as well. Integrating that trans justice value into survivor-centered advocacy, like we talked about in the previous slide. So these these people that we're bringing into our agency as advocates, invest the training in them so they can also become leaders of agencies as well. Move to survivor-centered frameworks when describing those affected. I think we all do that pretty well, but always, evaluate and make sure that we're doing more and more of that. Supporting and investing in peer-to-peer anti-violence and advocacy models that are developed by and for trans people and communities. We can also support by practicing alternative models of accountability outside of the criminal and legal system. We can invest in prevention and cultural change strategies that improve the social status of trans people. We should all be advocating for and disseminating positive and diverse representations of trans people and their relationships in the media and elsewhere. And then designing and engaging in creative prevention and cultural change initiatives that positively represent trans people and reach people where they spend their time. So centers of faith, community centers, schools, online. These are all great examples of things that we can do to be more inclusive of trans people of color. So finally, in the last few slides, I want to talk about practice implications. So we understand, the history of the strong Black woman. What are the constructs? What does that look like? What are the perceptions, the responsibilities, why Black women feel the need to maintain this, this image? But what are we going to do about it? What can we do to ensure that these women get their needs met when they're sexually assaulted? So the first thing, practice implication, just recognizing that maintaining a facade of strength may be difficult to abandon, right? You've been doing that all your life. It's hard to change that. As I disclosed personally, as I see this in myself, I have to make myself change. And I still feel guilty when someone comes to clean my house and I go and pre-clean before they get here, because I don't want them to think, Black people are dirty. I don't want them to feed into any stereotypes about Black people. So changing that facade is difficult to abandon. I also feel guilty because I feel like I should be as strong as my grandmother and be able to do everything, do all the things, and keep my house spotless like she did. So letting go of that will be hard for a lot of Black women. Also, mental health clinicians should consider how Black women may conceptualize mental illness. Remember the Cinderella complex, that functioning depression? We need to look at how they may conceptualize mental illness in concert with previous experiences relative to depression, obesity, help seeking, and mental health treatment. So knowing that maybe our assessment tools that we're using, are they really inclusive? Look at what you're asking and how you're asking, and if that speaks to all aspects of that person, particularly women of color. And then sister circles. Sister circles have been suggested as a promising outlet for support for Black women experiencing mental health conditions or anything else. So we have historically healed in community. If you do any research prior to being enslaved and colonized, we've always healed in community. So these sister circles, these friend groups, whatever that looks like, that is a very promising outlet to help Black women. Let's go to the next one. Other things that I wanted to highlight are women internalizing the strong Black woman schema may present atypical symptoms of mental illness. So when we're working with our clients after they've survived a trauma, we know the symptoms of PTSD, but does it look the same in Black women? Be mindful that they may not have the classic symptoms, and you may have to probe and assess and ask more questions about their symptoms in order to decide if they have a mental health disorder where they need further treatment. The internalization of the strong Black woman schema may enhance existing cultural biases against mental health professionals and ultimately discourage women from seeking care. And so there are some things you just know. When you have certain people come into your office and see you, you have to know just them being there is so huge. Like whenever I hold space for Black men ever, or honestly, any man of color, I recognize how huge it is for him to be sitting on the other side of my computer or sitting in my office, because that is not something that they are taught that they should do, is seek help. And so when you see a Black woman in your office, know that her coming to you asking for help is probably going against everything she's been taught, everything she's believed and internalized about herself. So just being there is worthy of us holding space for them in the way that they need it, and being gentle with them, encouraging them for even coming in. And then last point, think creatively about how to introduce Black women into care. So maybe the way that you normally do your intake, you might want to amend that a little bit for someone that's coming in. And you may notice that Black women may minimize their symptoms. They may even minimize the event, the assault, or even take some responsibility for it. And so the way that we provide advocacy, prevention services, all of the things that you guys told me you did at the beginning, the way that we do those things may need to change when we're looking at women of color, when we're looking at trans women of color. And then, who is this person? You guys know who this is?
Tarana Burks,
Yes. Tell us about her.
the person who is credited with the Me Too movement.
With the Me Too movement, yes. So I thought this was a great reminder to remember that the strong Black woman is a mantra that is so much a part of US culture that it is seldom realized how great of a toll and a burden it's been on the emotional well-being of the African-American woman. As much as it may give her the illusion of control, it keeps her from identifying what she needs and reaching out for help. And so this is so powerful to me. I think this is something I could print and put up in my office just to remind me. Another thing I want to do is talk just briefly to other Black women in here, and just a reminder that having Black or brown skin is not enough to serve the population. While we can relate to many things because we share that, every woman is different. And so the same things that we talked about here, I think it's just as important for Black women to take these things into consideration in the work that we do as well. I want to spend time asking or listening to you guys, either give comments, ask questions. I have my contact information here, and I'll also drop it in the chat. So I'm gonna I'm gonna stop sharing in a bit, but you see my thank you. I'll actually give a more formal thank you at the end. And then I like this quote: "Is strength is knowing that it's okay to be fragile sometimes." So we can still be strong and be fragile at the same time. And then I have references for you as well, so you guys will have access to this. But right now, I want to stop sharing and spend the rest of our time. We have about 20 minutes or so, answering questions, hearing comments, anything you want to interject, particularly practice implications. If you have other things that you're doing at your agency that could be beneficial, please share. So I would prefer you to unmute and talk to me, but it's okay to type in the chat, which I now have access to. Hi, Amanda. It's good to see you too. No, I know we have some questions. I'm gonna wait.
I had a question.
Go ahead,
So
Alejandra.
I've seen, well, I spend a lot of my time on my phone. So I see a lot of these things of, let's just be strong Black women, like you mentioned. And
Yeah.
while that is good, I feel like taking the strong part kind of takes away the respect that people have for Black women. Like I feel that you have to be strong in order to have respect from others. So I don't know if it's just that Black women try to be strong and fit into this because of their culture and because of, you know, everything that they have to do and all of that, but also because they also know that being strong is the only way to get the respect from other ethnicities and,
Yeah.
you know, being heard. Because there's a lot of times when a Black woman comes out and nobody listens, but then someone else comes out with the same issue and apparently everyone is shocked. So I wanted to ask that, like, is that part of the problem?
That is a really good comment. And if I'm hearing you correctly, I'm hearing you say that when Black women being strong, if they weren't, then they would lose the respect of other people. And that's why they need to keep that up. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. And yeah, and I am by no means saying that this is a myth. As I said earlier, I do believe that Black women are strong, and I do believe in Black girl magic all day for sure. You know, however, the responsibility of that is what's the burden. And so I don't think most of us are going to stop being strong Black women, because I think that's who we are innately. However, we also need to know, our definition of what strong looks like, I think, can be evolved. We can evolve that in knowing that you can be fragile and that you can ask for help. And that is not a sign of weakness. Like, you know, people are divided over Simone, what is it, was quitting or whatever, I don't know what the words are, withdrawing on yesterday. I'm not a sports person, but withdrawing on yesterday. You know, a lot of people are applauding her. Of course, most, you know, my thread on social media are people that think like me, because I don't have time for other stuff on my timeline. But there are a lot of people who don't agree and have an issue with that. So let's normalize taking care of our mental health when we need to. Let's say that when Simone withdrew, let's trust that she knew what was best for her, encourage and support her. She's an amazing gymnast, and this shouldn't take away anything from her. I think that's what needs to happen. But I think that's a great point, Alejandra. And I think, just honestly, let's just talk all women in general. We hold families together and we are strong. And I don't think that's going to change. But again, we need to be, I think we're harder on ourselves than anyone else. So we need to be more forgiving of ourselves and more supportive of ourselves. And then we as providers, we need to create the space to hold for these women.
We have a question and a comment related in the chat by Renee. I see what's going on with Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka as a positive change, that the work we're doing is having an effect on changing social norms from being cutthroat and number one to actually wanting to be well-rounded and adjusted.
Yeah.
We also,
I'm sorry, I want to say, thank you, Renee. I fully agree with that. And I think our Generation Z is going to be changing all kinds of things because they get it. You know, they get it not just with this, but with other issues. And they have the courage to say, I'm prioritizing my mental health. And I love that. So for you young people, you Generation Zers here, keep doing what you're doing because it's necessary. That's how we change and that's how we shift.
We have a question from Kelsey. One of the issues that I run into is Black women requesting counseling resources for their children, but not wanting to seek counseling for themselves. How do we address that? I think
when you offer resources, offer resources that meet their needs. I'm not saying that Black women can only be counseled by other Black women, but I will say that the Black women that I see are, by the time they get to me, it's because they've had a negative experience with someone else. I had one client who told me that every time she would talk about like a work issue that her therapist would always tell her to calm down, like she was being too aggressive. And so, and the therapist was a white woman. And so she was worried that she might become fearful of her. And so she wasn't able to truly be herself because she kept telling her to calm down. And you have to wonder, if she wasn't Black, her being passionate about whatever the issue is, would it have been perceived the same? You know, and then I've also had people say it's just too much to explain. You know, there are just certain things that are just understood among people that look like me, and explaining it is hard. I am happy to share that I often do counseling whenever I need to, because as a therapist, life happens, and you know, and as I evolve as a person, it affects my practice. And so I recognize the times that I need to go into counseling. And so I had a therapist who I adored. She was a white woman. And I saw her for a while after the loss of my dad. And then one day I was in her office. I had a shirt. It was just a regular shirt. If anybody subscribes to, I think is Izzy and somebody, anyway, they do these monthly subscription boxes, and I used to have those, and they always give a t-shirt, and the t-shirt said peace, love, and hip hop. And I guess if you saw me wearing that shirt, you might think I was big into hip hop. I guess, I don't know, but I remember her talking about coping skills, and she was like, well, what about hip hop dancing? And I just was like, yeah, I don't do that, you know? And why do you just assume that that's what I do? And I know I had the shirt on, but anyway, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And then when I found myself, and that was, you know, at our termination, and then I found myself now, you know, I at that time I lost my dad and I lost my mom the latter part of last year. And it just brought back a lot of childhood trauma and stuff like that that I really needed to address. And I knew that she wasn't the one to hold space for me. I needed someone that looked like me. And I still adore her. I would call her for other things, but when I'm talking about childhood stuff and in my life, I don't have time to explain a whole lot of stuff. So I want someone that looks like me. So the answer to your question, what can we do? We can provide resources that are Black women friendly. Like there's therapy for Black girls. There's a website where you can find someone that looks like you. And so that's what I would suggest, just providing the right resources. They will go and seek help when or if they're ready. The other thing to know is just even going into a therapist's office or any agency and talking about a sexual assault, talking about anything is not something we really do. We keep our personal business very private. You know, Black women that are here, put a yes in the chat if you've ever been told, don't talk about family business outside of this house. If you've ever been told that by any person, put a Y in the chat for me. Am I the only one? I cannot be the only one. I saw Isabel's hand a little earlier. If you
I posted in the chat.
I saw you raise your hand. Did you
I put the question in the chat because
you did. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't want to take over, like ask my questions, and then
okay.
I want.
Okay, and I have access to the chat, Karen, so I can go ahead and move forward with that. So I saw the last one from Renee. Okay. Hi, Irene. She says she loves the idea of changing what it means to be strong. Irene is my friend as well. Amanda says, I definitely feel a conflict with the George Floyd killing and sexual assault being tied to policing. I think this puts a lot of Black women in conflict with anti-violence work. Absolutely. Absolutely. The Bill Cosby thing, you know, what if I told you it is possible to believe that Bill Cosby assaulted multiple women and that he is also being treated unfairly by the criminal justice system. Not because he's dealing with consequences, but if he were white, it would not be the same. And so you can believe both things at the same time. It is possible, because I absolutely believe he's guilty. However, I definitely think his punishment is disproportionate to other people who have committed the same offense who are not Black. So yeah, it's definitely a dilemma. Who said that? I think that was Amanda. Yeah. wish I knew the answer to that. Isabel says, our agency has counseling opportunities in a predominantly Black community, and we struggle to get clients. And I think this idea of not needing this type of support is part of that. How can we create this space in our agency where they can feel supported and heard? The staff member that facilitates the group is a Black woman. The group setting. You know, in my personal experience, in my practice, I don't find that Black women are ready to go right into a group usually. Usually do individual sessions first. They get a little comfortable with the counseling, and then they may be more open to the group. The other thing is, I think I found this out at TASA a few years ago. I was in a workshop, and I wish I could remember the names of the people who held it, but they were staff members, and it was specifically for people of color. And they held space for people of color, and it was closed to everyone else. And so just recognizing that these safe spaces are necessary. So you said you have a Black woman facilitating the group. Is it a BIPOC group? Is it only open to people of color? That may be one thing. Because I can tell you now, I'm not going to go to a very diverse group and talk about my childhood trauma, because I don't want people to think badly of my parents. I don't want, I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to feed into any stereotype. But if it's a group of Black women or Black and brown women, I may be more inclined to. But recognizing that some spaces need to be held just for that group. And there's no racism in that or reverse discrimination. So I would recommend that. And again, making sure that your staff is representative of the people you want to see. So if it's a largely Black community, I would assume that your staff is quite diverse as well. I think that would be necessary.
I'd like to add something else to that too.
Please.
I think those spaces are important. BIPOC specific spaces are really important. And at TASA, we've been trying to do that a little bit more in different ways. I think one of the other things that we've been doing is really unrolling the idea of alternative types of healing. And just because you have someone who is a Black therapist or a Latinx therapist or a Muslim therapist or, whatever the gambit may be, doesn't mean that talk therapy is culturally resonant with communities. And so we're trying to use a one size fits all approach and say talk therapy is for everybody. We're just going to put substitute identity that is marginalized, and have that person be the spokesperson that can reach all of the people in that community, which is not a monolith.
Yeah.
Right. And so
amazing.
If that's the consensus, right, that we're having a hard time getting, then maybe they don't want therapy. Maybe they want something else.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to start a community garden, right? Maybe you want to start some other kind, like agency that I worked at before used to have cafecito time, a cafecito for primarily Latinx community, right? What could that look like? A sewing circle, gardening, right? What does your community need? You know better what resonates most with your community. Yeah. And start with just non-disclosure. The idea of seeking support that doesn't require disclosure, I think just like, for me, when I first started wrapping my head around that, I was like, what do you mean not requiring disclosure? I don't get it. Right. And trying that approach for support, I think really makes a world of difference.
Thank you so much, Denise. One of the things that I've been doing this summer is learning how to decolonize my mental health practice. And in doing that, I've learned so much. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, I've been doing all kinds of things there. It's just my name, Kiva Harper, you can find me. I've been posting so much and educating on different ways that we've healed traditionally, and how do I integrate that into my practice? I've also learned, like, some of the evidence-based treatment that I've learned in school is not as effective with Black women, like CBT, for instance. It's all about irrational thoughts. That doesn't quite fit with us. And so, like Denise said, we can't do this cookie cutter approach. We have to challenge ourselves. We have to think outside of the box. So thank you so much for sharing that. Renee asks, how do you approach an all-white board leadership? My first thing is, why is the board all white? That's number one. Especially if you're, I know this is not Isabel, but like in Isabel's community, that's another thing. Is your board also diverse? Are there people from that community? Are there Black women, Black people at all on that board? But how do you approach an all-white board leadership to entertain the idea that we should hire more leaders that reflect the population that we serve? Do that by making the board more diverse. I think that takes care of that. And then when you have a diverse board, then you can also have a diverse leadership. So that's one thing. So talk to whoever your powers that be are, and just find people, seek people out that you think will be a great addition to the board and invite them on. I see all my yeses for people that were told, don't be telling our business. Thank you. All of us.
Offer a suggestion to Renee also?
Yes.
Renee, it might be a good idea to find like-minded people in your agency that you guys can lean on one another for support. And create that space for one another. I've worked at an agency where I didn't have any power to make any decisions on who's on our board or leadership. So for me, it was seeking out other people who were like-minded and providing support to one another. And then also being vocal about the need for that space in the organization that I was at. So thank you.
Thank you, Shelley, for sharing that. Okay, we only have a few minutes, so I'm going to speed through. Isabel, your second question about the disclosure, I think I'll let you reach out to Denise privately and she could talk to you more about that. Let's see that. Let's see the next question. Toria, I hope I said that right. When you mentioned the transmission of the strong Black woman schema to young girls, I think about how those characteristics carry over and in a way positions Black girls to be seen as adults instead of children. We know that Black women or young Black girls are seen as older than they are already. That already happens. They're seen as adults. They're treated more as adults when they're young. So we know that that's happening. And so when we're discussing violence against girls, we do have to take that into consideration. And, if you're doing a group, what's the reality for them may not be the same reality for their white counterparts. Like it or not, it's just the truth. And so we have to talk about that. All right. It looks like we got through them all. I don't see any other questions.
I think Monica was going to ask a question, Kiva.
Please, Monica, go ahead.
Two things. Kiva, would you be willing to share your wonderful resource list that has some of the theorists who are not white oppressive men?
Yes.
So that those of us that were trained in those clinical structures can start to decolonize that. And the other thing I was going to say was to Renee, sometimes you can't be a prophet in your own village. And I say this all the time. So maybe you need to find someone outside of your community, outside of your agency, who's someone on your board or someone in leadership in your agency could see as an expert, and have them be the talking person. So bring in someone else who they perceive as an expert, who can push your agenda.
Girl, you are so shady. White oppressive men. If you are interested in some of my stuff that I've been doing on decolonization, and you want to you want a list of other theorists who are not white and male, my email is in the chat. I will be happy to share that with you. I saw one last question, Kelsey. I think your hand was up. Please go ahead and unmute and share. No? Kelsey, I saw it earlier. Okay, and I got time for one more. Anybody? No? Well,
I'm sorry, can I?
Go ahead, Amanda.
Hi, sorry, I'm like multitasking. I was wondering, just thinking about the internalized, like, strong Black woman idea, and how we're kind of forced to be, we have to be. Like, it's not even just like a stereotype, like you said, it's real. I think there's a lot of pride and identity there. And I just want to think about, and I think you shared a lot of resources about kind of what we can, mental health stuff. But for our allies that do care about Black women, that are understanding the extra burden, like what would you tell allies when considering, for people that supervise Black women, like how do you kind of balance, or how do you be a leader, recognizing that piece that sometimes we do expect too much. Sometimes, like, anyway, I don't think I articulated that right, but.
No, I think I know what you're saying. I think just really not engaging in performative allyship and being a true ally. Please excuse me because I don't know her name, but there was a young white woman who won an award last week, and she used that time to focus on Black women who are just as awesome as her, but don't get the same platform. If anyone knows her name, please drop it in the chat because you should look it up. But she gave an amazing speech. And so I think as allies, unfortunately, the people that probably need to be here aren't here. Those of you that are here, you get it because you chose to attend this workshop. But being a true ally and speaking up and using your voice in those settings where people may hear you and not others. That's what you can do as an ally. I want to thank you guys for attending the workshop, all of you for being here and for allowing me to hold space for you, despite the fact that I can't talk. Someone told me that the planets are out of alignment when you do that and your words are mixed up and you just tap like this right here between your thumb and your forefinger, and that should get you back aligned. And I didn't do that. So thank you for bearing with me as I tripped over my words. And again, it was my pleasure to hold space for you. Please email me if there's anything I can do to support you. And I hope that this was helpful. And I'll turn it back over to our moderators. Thank you.
Kiva, thank you so very much for being here with us today. We really appreciate you and your expertise and bringing your knowledge and insight to our community. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Please, thank you. Please feel free to complete the surveys and give as much feedback as you wish. We will see you at the next workshop. Did you want to say something, Karen?
No, Shelly, you covered everything.
Sorry. Thank you, guys. See you later.
Shelly, girl, you look more gorgeous than ever.
Denise, you make me feel so good. Thank you.
We all need a Denise in our lives.
Right?
Shelly, do you or Karen need anything else from me?
No, nope, not at all. Thank you so very much. I enjoyed your workshop so much.
I'm glad you did. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to log off.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, interpreters. You guys are phenomenal. Thank you so much. Thank you.